Previously on Chaos Head Noah.
I'm so depressed I can't even blink.
And so it continues. Greetings, my name's Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of the I almost said Higurashi, of Chaos Head Noah. So, we got Orihara's route done and over with. So that leaves us only Ayase's route, Rimi's route, and the route for the true ending. So, 3 endings left to go. So, like I was saying towards the end of the previous episode, the next heroine on my list is going to be Ayase. Now, if there's any heroine whose backstory I really want to learn about and am most curious about, it's Ayase's, because compared to all the other heroines, she's the one I feel we know the least amount of information for. And I'm quite curious to see if her route will actually go into any significant detail regarding, well, her life outside of that mental hospital that she was forced to stay at for a while during her early childhood that was run by the Church of the Divine Light. Not sure how much information we'll actually get in reality, but I'm sure there's gotta be something. And whatever that something is, I'll take it. Plus, she seems like she could potentially be pretty fun to hang out with whenever there's, no crazy plot shenanigans occurring all around everybody, which, well, unfortunately, I'm sure will quickly make themselves apparent. So, the amount of peacetime and regular socialization will be brought down to a very small minimum amount of time. But hey. Maybe within that tiny little time window, we'll get to it could be interesting. So, with all that being said, I'm sure you all know the routine by now. I will see you all shortly whenever I get to something new. Oh, there you go. Once again, perfect timing. So, I need to select a negative with you? Really? Well then. In that case, let's do that. Oh, hey. Yeah. This occurs around here too, that's right. Alright, so... Fess must be asking me for salvation. I'll say yes. I want to give in to Fess's seduction. Nay. I'm sure jumping off would feel amazing. Until it doesn't. Then you feel nothing. I don't care if I die, as long as it's together with Fess. How romantic of you. Yep. I want to be set free from everything. Even Fess, my man? Alright. Now we wait until we get to the new story segments. But first, before I cut out again, I think I got a little quick reading to do. Snowdrop. The excessively violent design of Kozue's sword represents the very soul of Kozue, who has no mercy for those who seek to harm her. Kozue is small and weak, so as a result of her intense desire for power to protect herself, she materialized a gigantic weapon that was the exact opposite of her physique. In addition to its size, it's specialized for combat. It automatically provides a target based on Kozue's will, then draws the most efficient trajectory to demolish it. This is why, whenever Kozue wields this sword, it appears as if the sword is swinging her around. Interesting. So, everything that we saw happen towards the end of her routes during her rampage, even though she was mentally crying out for that she didn't want to attack anybody, the truth is, deep down, she actually did. And so the sword responded accordingly. Makes sense to me, honestly, that it played out that way, considering how her contradictory state of mind at the time. But still, yeah, it's nice to get those, to get an explanation for that, I suppose. Oh yeah, and I'm also extremely delusional, again. Just in case any of you were wondering what I got this time on the diagnostic results. I'm starting to think that the universe is screwing with me at this point. Because every time I either fail a mission in this little Metal Gear game that I'm playing, or succeed in one, or anything like, or even so much as trigger an alert from a guard, the skip function stops, and suddenly I'm faced with new content. I'm honestly getting a little bit freaked out at this point. Not even joking. But whatever. I'll just forget about it for now and just do what I should be doing. As morning progressed, Kishimoto Ayase stood before the school gate, watching the sky absent-mindedly. Students passed by on either side, and she paid no attention to the strange looks she received from them. Her gaze was full of emptiness. From her perspective, the school was utterly pointless. Her reasoning being, she knew the world would end very soon. Even as a third year, she felt out of place wearing a school uniform. This was no time to be attending school. So she believed. Still, she occasionally went in order to continue her search. Her search for the gate and the other Black Knights. Sume Academy was the place where the Black Knights would gather. Or rather, it was the place where they would be gathered. That was the conclusion she had reached. Turns out you were right about that, as we found out in Orihara's route. From a young age, Ayase had seen as a problem child. She never finished middle school, thus preventing her from enrolling in high school. In spite of this, she transferred into Sume Academy during May of her first year. A day she remembered vividly, even now. She had stood before the gate on that day, just as she was now. Until then, she had been institutionalized by Urquhart Medical. During that time, she endured a hellish trial in order to become a Black Knight. 1 month of psychiatric treatment later, she was finally discharged. 1 month was all they gave you after all that psychological torture? I honestly don't know what to say to that one. But considering who's involved, I guess I really shouldn't be surprised. The hospital's director, a man whose name she had long since forgotten, spoke to her at that time. Starting tomorrow, you'll be attending high school in Shibuya at Sume Academy. I've done all the work needed to enroll you already. She was not told why. Those words still in her mind, the day she had arrived before the school gate, she murmured something to herself.
天空赤く染まるとき、写真王の帯同と呼応し、7つの黒き邪神は生まれ、やがて聖域へと召喚される。そして宣言するのだ。悪夢よ、最悪よ、暗黒なる肉塊たちよ。邪神により邪神をほふられ、邪神王が支配する世界は砕け散ると。
They were verses of the legend from the Gladiol Book of Psalms and Revelation, a prophecy Ayase had taken to heart. One she uttered only because she knew now for certain. This was the gathering place of the Black Knights. Thus she would continue waiting. Thus she would continue searching. And as time passed, she had never felt a single trace of wickedness. Until now. At last she could sense a presence. The presence of a potential Black Knight. It had certainly kept her waiting, but the change was wholly a welcome one.
もう時間はないわ。グラジオールの復活はすぐそこ。
Her words a faint, quiet murmur. Another Black Knight. With this thought, Ayase passed through the gate, seeking the boy she had met at the concert venue. Ah, so she actually was seeking us out, huh? Too bad, Misumi. You never had a chance from the start, because the truth of the matter was, she was looking for me all along. Poor you. Oh. According to the minimum attendance chart, I didn't have to go to school today. But despite that, I came to school anyway for one reason, and one reason only. To see Rimi. I had no doubt the Dokuns in class would make fun of me, just like they always did. It would definitely suck, but if it meant I could see Rimi, I could endure it. It was possible that Shogun could show up again. He seemed to be playing to me like it was some kind of game after all. Maybe he'd feel like sending me on another quest soon. Just the thought alone terrified me. I tried to grasp my D-sword, but even that was just to protect myself from him. Without that sword, how could I ever hope to escape his evil clutches? Maybe if Rimi was by my side, like she said she would be, but she'd been absent from school lately, which worried me. What if she'd been taken hostage, just like Nanami? Was there anyone out there who could help me? I entered the classroom, my head pointed straight at the floor. Before taking my seat, I took a quick look around. I looked toward Rimi's seat first. Empty. Was she taking today off too? Was it really that simple? Was she really just taking time off? I began to feel anxious. Next, I looked over at Kozupi's desk. At least we have Kozupi. She was in her seat, face down and huddled up.
Takumi-san.
Morning. Morning, Kozupi. I didn't make eye contact, but I greeted her with my inner voice. The female Dokuns were watching me, smirking. Cunts. It was no different than yesterday. They all already labeled me as the otaku freak who said he was psychic and made an ass of himself on TV, and that label wasn't going away anytime soon. The male Dokuns didn't seem to have arrived yet. It's pretty common for them to skip the first period, and that was fine by me. I took my seat. Suddenly, someone clapped me on the back. Get lost, you user, you manipulator. I know you only keep me around to impress the ladies.
Oh, Taku.
It was Misumi-kun, with an uncomfortable look on his face. His slap was a lot weaker than usual. Not feeling all pumped up this morning, are we, buddy? Blood not flowing to your extremities all that properly? You certainly had no issue ignoring me before. Why start paying attention to me now all of a sudden? I'm sure that you'll regret talking to me. You'll become the next Doku's next target, just like me. Yeah, Misumi-kun. Even you. You'd be better off not associating with an otaku freak like me. I remained silent, but Misumi-kun forced a smile.
暗いな。朝から新規臭いぜ。ま、お前はそういうやつだって分かってるけどな。
As harsh as his words were, I didn't get the feeling that he was joking or acting sarcastic. After all, it was pretty common for him to say stuff like that.
あれだ。この前は悪かったな。自分の立ち位置ってのもつかみかねててな。
Oh yeah, I understand. No hard feelings, none whatsoever. I promise.
でもまあ、いろいろ考えて、やっぱ今まで通りで行くことにしたからよ。
Forget what? I forgot what we were even talking about. Care to remind me?
よろしくな。
He had an indifferent expression on his face. You seriously want to keep talking at me, same as always? Do you actually enjoy hanging out with an otaku freak like me? No. Even though there's nothing to gain from it? As far as he's concerned, there is. Shit, I was actually getting wet now. Don't get your panties wet on us now, Takumi. If Misumi-kun wanted to fuck me in the ass right then, I probably wouldn't have been able to say no. That's pretty gay.
まあ、正直なところを言うと、お前に優しくしてやることで、俺は女にモテるわけだ。
Holy shit! He's actually just coming out and saying it! Well, holy freaking crap!
あんなダメ人間にも分け隔てなく接するなんて、とってもかっこいい人だわ、キャ。ってな。
Misumi Daisuke, go die in a hole. I didn't think I was this close to falling for you. Full homo. If you just didn't open your stupid mouth, nobody would have ever realized you were such a narcissist. Worst of all, as if I even needed to say it, was that it was totally in character. He's being completely sincere. Yeah, he's a totally sincere asshole. And so, I finally cracked. My lips curved into a bitter smile.
そういえば、岸本のことを聞いたか。まだ入院中らしいぜ。怪我は大したことなかったんだけど、精神的にかなり参ってるらしい。いいか、タク。女を落とすのに一番手っ取り早いのは、弱ってる時に優しくしてやることだ。
Translation. You replace the word heart with pants. And there you go. That's what you really meant to say. Aren't you glad to have a friend like me to help you during moments like these, where whenever you misspeak?
というわけで
I
俺
know I would be
本
happy
気
to
で
have a
岸本
friend
の
like
見舞いに
that.
行こうかなと思ってんだよね。そういえばタクって岸本と知り合いだったよな。な、一緒に行ってくんね。
Oh yeah, I know Kishimoto, and you wanna know something else? Unlike you, who she doesn't know, Kishimoto knows me. It was the typical subject matter for Misumi-kun, but that was beside the point. He'd mentioned Ayase. With Rimi gone, maybe she was someone I could turn to. Maybe I could depend on someone like her. You know, now that I think about it, Rimi should have actually been in that scene, like she was in all the other routes. And yet she wasn't. Huh. Surprised I didn't notice that. 7th case. It happened again. Another new gen. I bet I know what it is. Our favorite trio thugs just hanging around. Okay, how long was this damn thing go on for? This all looks exactly the same as far as text goes, even though it won't let me skip it. Yep, it's the Dokyun puzzle.
今日午前4時50分頃、東京都渋谷区の線路沿いで男性3人、警察の調べによりますと、殺されたのは3人とも3人の死体。渋谷では2ヶ月ほど前から猟奇殺人事件が頻発しており、警察では今回の事件も
昨日僕に絡んできた。
A little bit more before I get some new text here, I think. Right around here. Or not. Okay, apparently not. That's certainly one hell of a deviation. Kishimoto Ayase was lying in a hospital bed, idly gazing out the window. No bars lined the outside of it, a fact which set it apart from those at Ark Heart Medical, where Ayase had stayed in the past. All that stood past the window's frame was the landscape of Shinjuku, decorated by skyscrapers and illuminated by the sunset. Flocks of pigeons soared freely through the sky, flapping their wings to their heart's content. Every now and then she would gaze upon this sight with a pained expression. Her slightly tired eyes were empty and bleak. Her irises reflected nothing. Her lips, which could let flow a voice so beautiful it shook the youth of Shibuya, were now sealed tight. Not even so much as a hum escaped from them. Following her suicide attempt, an event which caused quite the turmoil, she had been admitted to the psychiatric ward of a large hospital in Nyoyogi. Her injuries were already very nearly healed. According to the doctors, it had been nothing short of a miracle that she had been able to survive a fall from that height, let alone with barely even a scratch. However, she had indeed hit her head fairly hard, and as such, she had been rushed to the hospital, primarily so they could see how the situation would develop. It had already been over a week since then. However, despite her having been admitted for such a reason, all it seemed to entail was a few rudimentary tests taken every couple of days or so. Beyond that, she had been rather neglected. They want you to feel neglected, so it stimulates your gigolomaniac brain in all the right ways, methinks. Bastards. Her hospital room was private, with no other beds inside it, excuse me. Ever since her stay had begun, her D-sword had been leaning against the window. It constantly emitted a blue light, yet nobody who ever visited her ever seemed to notice. Not that there had been many visitors to begin with. Phantasm fans would attempt to force their way into her room daily, but as they always caused a disturbance in the process, the hospital had an excuse to forbid them from visiting her. And since Ayase was somewhat detached from her family, there were almost no others who came to visit her. Her fellow band members had made an appearance once, but Ayase used that opportunity to announce her decision for the band to break up. They had not contacted her again since.
岸本さん、体温計ピピってなりました？
Hello, Nurse Abortion. How are you doing this fine evening? A nurse wearing white scrubs opened the door to the room, and swiftly entered. Ayase slowly turned to look at the nurse's face, then took out the thermometer that had been resting under her arm. It was as if she had only just remembered its presence. The nurse took a look at the recorded temperature shown on its digital screen, then took note of it on the clipboard she had brought with her.
37度1分と。
You're doing that thing with your mouth again.
37.
37?
Going to class.
Oh my god. 37. My girlfriend sucked 37 dicks.
In a row?
ちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキする。頭。
Ayase grimaced in pain once again.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
I know I've beaten this horse to death at this point, but you really should have just been a ventriloquist rather than a homicidal nurse. Having recorded her temperature, the nurse consoled Ayase with a kind smile. Her expression was so gentle, it was clear to all how she was able to put her patients at ease. I don't know. I think the man-child man would really beg to differ on that one. And her colleague, whose name I'm forgetting right now. At least those two. And yet, despite the nurse's attempts, Ayase simply pushed her hand against her forehead as she shook it back and forth. Ayase had been plagued by mild headaches ever since she had first been hospitalized. They were not especially painful, but they still left her with an uncomfortable feeling that refused to go away. One that felt as if her brain itself was convulsing. It even reached the point where her ability to think was impaired. As well as this, her body would feel as heavy as lead. Ayase had experienced such symptoms in the past. Namely, when she'd been institutionalized at Arkhart Medical. Since then, her head had constantly been split apart by painful headaches, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It deprived her of all sleep and emotional stability. You'd think there'd be dark circles under her eyes then. Those were the memories she did not want to research. Oh wait, from back then. Duh. The past she had sealed away. The events of around 2 years ago. And yet her headache was causing him to flash back into her mind once more. In them, a dark room. Its single window locked behind bars. Apart from the wall in which that window stood, the rest of the walls were covered with mirrors. Ayase had been placed in the center of the room, sat in a crude steel chair. She was wearing headgear with countless cables protruding from it. Her hands were tied to the back of the chair. Her head was locked in place, with her chin tilted slightly upward. Not another soul was present in the room. Thus, all that could be heard were the sounds of Ayase's labored breathing and the metal groans of the chair she sat upon. Saliva trickled down from the corners of her mouth, accompanied by moans akin to those of a beast's. If anyone were to hear them, they would never have been able to guess that they would be coming from a girl as young as her. Wait a minute. Oh. She was being tortured. Slow, methodical torture. One that made her very, very little sound. The method only involved one single thing. Not even an action. A drop of water, falling from above, onto her forehead, every 5 seconds, on the exact same spot. That was all it took. And it would continue unrelentingly for 2 full days. The result. Ayase could think only of the drop that would fall next. Her senses were sharpened to their limits. And each time a drop fell onto her forehead, another hallucination would be born. One in which each and every nerve across her body was plucked out one by one. One in which the bones of her entire skeleton crumbled to dust. One in which her head was pierced by a long, sharp awl. One in which all liquids within her body, including her blood, froze to ice. Speaking of liquids, I'm going to take a little myself. One in which the skin lining her entire body slowly rotted away, before eventually peeling off. Assailed without end by these sensations, Ayase could no longer maintain her sanity. Returning to her senses, she breathed erratically as she tightly gripped the sheets lining the bed. Her body trembled as those dark memories of hers resurfaced in her mind. The nurse that had been in her room just a moment ago was already gone. Dinner time had just arrived at the hospital, and the clamorous sounds that came from it resounded from down the hall. Ayase tried to recall the words the nurse had spoken to her right before leaving. Was her headache really just a side effect of the drugs she was on? Or had it been caused by her hitting her head, perhaps? Or perhaps it was just a hallucination brought forth by her past memories. She was unable to come to a decisive conclusion. Wiping away the sweat that ran down her forehead, Ayase called forth a smile laced with self-loathing.
構わないわ。今さら何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。もう迷わない。私は。
Murmuring perhaps delirium, Ayase soon became aware of a sound reverberating throughout the hall. Comforting the sound of shoes stepping on the linoleum floor. It was certainly not being made by a nurse. And the sound of the footsteps was heading right for the room she was in. Someone knocked on her door, and she sealed her lips tight. You. Is it me, or have you shrunk? You should stay at this height. It suits you. That someone was but a single man. He had come bringing gifts, namely a large basket filled with all manner of fruits. She could recognize the man, which was far from a good sign. Thus, she stared at him with a dubious glare.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。自分は
知ってるわ。
The man was a detective at the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, and a crazy murderer. He had once shadowed Ayase, as she was originally a suspect for the New Gen case. The detective, relieved by her response, scratched his head. His demeanor was unendingly casual.
いやー嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
The detective moved closer to her bed. Ayase briefly glanced at her D-sword, leaning against the window. It lay just outside her reach.
今日はお見舞いに来たんすよ。
I like how she just slowly slid over to make room for him.
そうは思えないわ。目的は？
鋭いっすね。
The detective flinched very overtly, his reaction perhaps bordering on theatrical.
まあちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これよかったら食べてほしいっす。
The detective smiled innocently, presented the basket he had brought with him, then placed it at Ayase's feet without waiting for approval.
うまいっすよ。あと高かった。
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure you get plenty. I'm sure you get plenty of charity funds from your fellow churchgoers, right, my friend?
いらない。
Maybe even the founder of your little cult gives you a little bit of pocket change, as necessary.
まあそう言わずせっかく買ってきたんで。後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。あ、しまった。綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会ってないんだったっすね。
You know, with the benefit of hindsight, I can now see what he's doing here, and he's just pushing her buttons any way that he can. And I'm sure that she is able to pick up on that, too. Which is why she's so wary of him. Despite the detective's insensitive remark, Ayase felt nothing in response to it. Well, then again... Well, maybe? I don't know. I don't know how much... Well, it's obvious she senses something's off with him that makes her uncomfortable. But I don't know how much she actually knows about him. Her ties to her parents have been cut from a very young age. Her parents had a reputation to uphold, so a child that often caused problems like Ayase had been inconvenient to them, to say the least. Her only remaining contact with them was the wire transfer she received for her living expenses each month, though it could hardly be called that.
申し訳ないっす。
The detective apologized, bowing down hastily. Ayase had only just gotten over the shock caused by her flashback, so she was in no mood to speak with him. Nonetheless, she urged herself to talk all the same.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星はついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective smirked. He was attempting to laugh the question away. And yet, something unrefined could be seen through the cracks of that smile.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
You just go ahead and keep on bragging, and I, meanwhile, will just count down the seconds until your next demise.
まだ容疑者なのに、彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
The detective casually denied it with a smile, putting Ayase's persistent questions to rest.
ああ、今の話誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど。
I'm sure your supervisors are also in Nozumi and the Church of Divine's Light's pockets. Last I checked, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで武将髭生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase did remember him. When she had been questioned, that older detective had been even more talkative than the younger one she was conversing with now. His way of speaking had been a lot more assertive as well.
あの人がすぐこのバカってどうなるんすよ。
Well, you are pretty much a big dick. Let's be real here.
そのくせ自分は本来の操作をせずに、なんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて。
Well, you're the big dick because you are just dicking around killing people. Because fanaticism.
挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて。
Oh, and there's also the matter of you and your walking fleshlight sacrificing your child for said murders too, in the midst of everything as well. But I mean, hey, I feel like I'm starting to beat that dead fetus to even deader than dead at this point. So I'll just shut up about it for now.
最近胃が痛いんすよね。いや、まあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たの。
Ayase interrupted the man, and his smile quickly soured.
ああ、いや、申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守る、一生のお願いっすよ。
Well, considering how your life is probably only going to last, for realistically speaking, well, what's the timeline currently? What, maybe a week or two at the most from where things currently stand now? That's not going to be too much of a debt, I think, all things considered.
それで
一つ目はなんであんなことを？
Despite his ambiguous phrasing, Ayase could tell that he was referring to her diving off the school's rooftop.
もう何度も話したわ。他の刑事さん。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか？
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなこと言ってたっすよね。
And that was the second question he had for her. Ayase let out a faint sigh.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ。あの詩はグラジオール期目視録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。世界に邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するにはグラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。杭は剣へと形を変え神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。目には目を、歯には歯を。邪神を背負いし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるので。
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
Ayase glared at the detective in response to his comment.
設定じゃないわ。現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective casually brushed away Ayase's objection, though she was all too used to this form of dismissal by now. Not a single person she had told this story to thus far had believed it.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
The detective mumbled to himself as he folded his arms. This was very obviously another act of theatrics, and Ayase had no intention of commenting on it.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう。質問する気がないなら出て行って。頭が痛いの。
ああ、いや、実はね、バンさんが妙なことを言い出してるんすよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Upon hearing that the subject of that remark was plural, Ayase raised her eyebrows in suspicion.
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
I think this is the first real deviation from the scene that I think I've seen. God damn time we're getting something new. I was wondering why we're just going through this whole thing, but I guess it was just leading up to this. As she replied, Ayase's line of sight was directed not toward the man, but toward her hand that lay atop her bed sheets.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でも、ニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士とは無関係。
ああ、そうっすか。
The detective, completely disinterested in what Ayase had just said, brushed off her words once again, then began to stretch. And there's the ringtone. I'm just going to skip through a little bit of this.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？それに出てくるダース・スパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディー。実は自分スパークウォーズ、あ、興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼。じゃ自分はこれで。
With that, the detective concluded a conversation in which he had no partner, then left the hospital room. Ayase did not even turn around to watch him go. With the man gone, all that reflected in her eyes was the twilight sky slowly turning to indigo. Still treating this as a news scene? I'd showed up at the school on Thursday for one reason, and one reason only. To meet up with Misumi-kun so we could go see Ayase in the hospital. Granted, he had more or less forced me to tag along, but I still figured that maybe Ayase could help me out. With Rimi seemingly out of the picture, I needed someone else to protect me. And Ayase was one of the candidates I had in mind. So maybe, just maybe, if she had already recovered somewhat, she might have been able to do something to that effect. Top of that, with her help, my chances of obtaining a real D-sword would skyrocket. I really couldn't do it on my own. Then again, it was Ayase herself who said obtaining a D-sword isn't something one can teach. But still, this was Ayase we were talking about here. Surely she could help somehow. Coming in through the front entrance, Misumi-kun looked around the lobby in confusion. "What's wrong?" I called out to him.
いや、岸本の病室ってどこなんだろうなって思ってよ。
He had seriously come this far without knowing that? The guy was beyond belief sometimes.
ここは外来棟だよ。 病棟は隣。
そうなのか。
AH Tokyo General Hospital. It was the hospital I'd gone to ever since I was a kid. I'd even come here just the other day, so I was pretty knowledgeable on where everything was. Dr. Takashina's face flashed across my mind, and I involuntarily groaned to myself. As we walked to the hospital ward, Misumi-kun turned to me.
で、病棟の何号室だと思う？
そんなのわかんないよ。
This was a general hospital, so there were obviously a ton of different wards and departments. If I had to guess,
多分外科じゃないかな。でももしかすると精神科かも。
there had been any visible injuries on Ayase after she had fallen. And considering she'd attempted suicide, her mind had likely been brought to the brink, so her being in the psychiatric ward seemed very possible. Even I had been taken to the psych ward after the uproar at Oakfront.
タクって物知りだな。
Thinking that wandering around the ward would cause problems for the patients, we decided to ask for help at the nurses' station. And just like I predicted, they told us that she was on the floor for psychiatric patients.
なあ、この前話したよな。女を落とすのに一番簡単な方法。
Misumi-kun grinned from ear to ear as the two of us walked down the hall. Was that seriously your only reason for visiting her in the hospital? At least have the common sense not to talk about it out loud. Regardless, I think he said the fastest way was act like you care in her moment of weakness or something like that.
俺は今日こそあの難攻不落の岸本を落としてみせるぜ。
Misumi-kun shone a pearly white smile and gave me a thumbs up. It didn't matter how confidently he said them. The words coming out of his mouth were totally disgusting. But I guess he could get away with it because of his good looks. Well, it's been nice being an alpha male. He's something, alright, but an alpha male? No. Really, I'm more qualified to be an alpha male than he is. The only thing he's got good.
お前って岸本と仲いいだろ？
The only thing he's really got going for him is confidence and his face. But past that, he doesn't seem to have much in terms of muscle. If he has the muscle, too, on top of everything else, then yeah, you could definitely call him an alpha male then. But since he clearly doesn't, I would kind of call him, well, not a beta, but somewhere in between a beta and an alpha.
別に。
しらばっくれるなよ。というわけで、
He's a half
フォロー頼む
alpha.
ぜ。岸本にいかに三角大輔って人間が素晴らしいかを語ってくれ。
無理だよ。
無理とか言うなって。マジ頼むからさ。
Have a little restraint, will you? You're at a hospital, not a mixer. With him acting like this, was it even a good idea to have him see Ayase at all? It wasn't like she really cared about him anyway. The pit in my stomach was getting deeper and deeper by the second.
お、タク。病室はここじゃねえか？
Misumi-kun stopped in front of the door and pointed at the nameplate. It definitely said Kishimoto Ayase. The door was closed, though, so we couldn't actually see who was inside.
いいか？うまく俺に話を合わせろよ。
うん。
For a time being, I nodded in agreement. Although, even if I did get the chance to say something to Ayase, I doubted I'd be able to say much, regardless of whether Misumi-kun was there or not.
Ayase, Kishimoto-san!
Misumi-kun opened the door, greeting Ayase with a cheerful tone.
お見舞いに来た。
Oh, what's going on? But that tone didn't last very long. His face immediately froze. Wondering what made him stop, I decided to peek over his shoulder. Hold on just a second. Damn it. What the? That's Seina's and... oh, fucking hell. And Rimi's thing. What the hell? The room was around 10 square meters in size. Past the entrance, there was a bathroom to the right and a bed in the back. And on the bed sat Ayase, stained with blood from head to toe. Her hollow eyes pierced straight through us. Misumi-kun let out a pathetic scream, then shoved me aside and flew out of the room. I wanted to run as well, but my legs were frozen in place. I quivered in fear. Why are Rimi and Seina's D-swords here? They're not lying around dead in this room somewhere, are they? My legs were frozen in place. I quivered in fear. And yet, at the same time, I was struck by the bewitching beauty of the blood-drenched girl, as well as the things leaning against the wall behind her. I couldn't move an inch from where I stood. The objects resting there, as if they were the most normal thing in the world, were D-swords. 3 of them, to be precise, including the one I'd seen her wielding before. Each one had a different shape. One had a form so strangely sophisticated it could barely pass for a sword. Another was shaped like a cross, its form evoking a sense of heart-rending pity. And the last one, which Ayase had used before, appeared mystical, yet aerodynamic. Why did Ayase have 3 D-swords? Wait, why had I assumed that a person could only have one? Maybe Seina and Kosubi had multiple swords too.
Takumi.
She called my name, and I gulped. She began to approach me, her body surrounded by an air of elegance. I was frozen in place.
来てくれたのね。
どうしてそんなに血が。
Her pajamas were dyed crimson by an abundance of blood. Blood that hadn't even dried yet. The rusty smell of fresh blood seeped into my nose.
黒騎士の血よ、これは。
黒騎士って。綾瀬本人の。
いいえ。
じゃあ誰？綾瀬はその人を殺したの？
Ayase smiled a wide smile, and then she giggled.
怯えているのね、匠。
I'm legitimately confused. Doesn't killing any of the so-called Black Knights, from your perspective, go against what you've been seeking to accomplish this entire time? How exactly is killing the other Black Knights supposed to stop the wicked hard King Gladiol, exactly? Ayase! Help me out here! I'm legitimately confused. She stroked my cheek with her blood-soaked fingers.
でも、君を怯えさせているのは、君自身の心の内にあるものよ。不浄なる邪心に打ち勝って、純粋な邪心のみを心に留めるのよ。そうすれば、ディソードは手に入る。手に入れてもらわなくちゃいけない。君は黒騎士なのよ。君には力があるわ。
ディソードを手に入れたら僕も殺すの？黒騎士を殺してきたんだろう？
惑わされないで。それが不浄なる邪心よ。
Ayase peered at my face, her hand still on my cheek. Her eyes looked hollow, and yet I could sense a profound radiance buried deep within them. I couldn't take my eyes off of her.
黒騎士は本来なら邪心を制御できるわ。けれど邪心王は巧妙だった。グラジオール記目視録詩編第6巻2章50節。グラジオールは邪心を少しずつ侵食することで静かに支配を完了し、邪心の暴走を引き起こすのよ。負けてはいけないわ、邪心王の精神侵略に。
I never made eye contact with a 3D girl for this long before. I was completely captivated by the traces of sorrow, desolation, and vigor in her eyes. I hadn't come listened to a single word she'd said.
守って。
When I snapped out of the trance, I found myself muttering that.
僕を守ってくれ。
いいわ。
Ayase nodded without a second thought. And then, she brought her face closer to mine. The stench of blood grew stronger, becoming more and more overwhelming.
これは予定されていたこと。
She whispered softly in my ear. My heart was racing.
君を守るわ。君も私を守って。
With her body smeared in blood, she was so corrupt, so impure, and yet so bewitching at the same time. It was hard to believe that a girl like her was a student at my school, and the same year as me, no less.
他の黒騎士はもう当てにはできない。最初は予言通りに黒騎士を集めようと思ったけれど、私の力では無理だった。でも匠がいてくれるなら。
Just like she had at the concert, Ayase showed me a face that was unbearably seductive. A face she rarely ever showed.
いずれ完全に開くわ、呼吸とその門は。その時邪神王はこの世に降臨する。だから急いで集めるのよ、7本のディソードを。私と君2人で。
Wait a minute. The cross-shaped D-sword isn't Seina's, is it? Cross-shaped. Snowdrop. Where is it? Rose. You, Water Lily. Fucking hell, which one is it? Now that I think about it, it might actually be Nanami's sword. Oh, whatever. That's an enemy sword that I see there. Takumi is not going to be happy once he figures out what you've done. Just saying. There were 3 D swords leaning against the wall. In other words, there were 4 left.
うち1本は匠、君が見つけるべき D ソードよ。
僕は手に入れられなかった。
Back at Oakfront, I'd come so close. But in the end, I'd thrown it all away. I'd given up completely on getting a D sword.
落ち込むことはないわ。機会はいくらでもやってくる。すでに匠は見えているんだから。それこそが君が黒騎士である証拠よ。
いつか手に入るのかな。
不浄なる邪神に打ち勝てば必ず。
What was wicked heart supposed to mean? Was she saying my heart was wicked and impure because of my perverted delusions or something? God, it would not be easy to conquer that. Possibly even impossible. WTF? Ayase let go of me and returned to her bed. And right when she did, she suddenly began undoing the buttons of her pajamas. Eh?
着替えるわ。
Oh. Yeah, she is in bloody clothes. That's right. Flustered, I instantly looked away. I figured I should probably leave the room. But right as I went to...
そこにいて。
Please give me a CG image that's safe for work, so YouTube won't drop the sword of Damocles on my head, shall we say. After hearing that, I couldn't move an inch. The only thing I heard after that was the sound of Ayase taking her clothes off, echoing throughout the quiet room. The hospital room wasn't very big. It was slightly larger than my base, but still pretty small. And so, there I was, alone in a tiny room with Ayase, and she was right behind me, changing clothes. I could tell it was happening right behind my back. Shit. I was so nervous. But why? It made no sense. It wasn't like I wasn't used to this kind of stuff. There was a scene just like this in that one eroge. A slime girl appears, with CGs by Higashi Matasema. So you're into slime girls, are you, Takumi?
なぜ目をそらすの、匠。
Modesty. If you can believe it. Coming from him, of all people.
だって見ちゃまずいし。
My voice almost cracked as I spoke.
恥ずかしいのね。
綾瀬は恥ずかしくないの。
Was she trying to tell me that it was okay to look? I mean, I wasn't into 3D girls. Not even remotely. That being said, if she was giving me permission to look, I wasn't going to say no.
惑わされているのよ、君は。その感情こそが邪神に侵食されている証拠。
Purge your mind of your lust, you wicked-hearted boy.
惑わされているって誰に？
邪神をグラジオール。
I casually picked up the book on the bedside table in front of me. On the cover was Gladio Saga, Volume 17, the Book of Psalms and Revelation.
グラジオールって何なの？
邪悪なる存在。負の妄想の塊。人の心の闇に偏在する無意識の集合体。世界に破滅をもたらす神。言い方はいろいろ。
そいつは車椅子に乗ってるの？足が不自由とか？
グラジオールは人の形をしているとは限らないわ。もういいわよ、こっちを見ても。
I slowly turned back around to face Ayase. She was already done changing clothes, and for some reason she was now wearing her school uniform.
なんで制服に？
迫っているから、グラジオール覚醒の時が。いつでも動けるようにしておかないと。
And for some reason that includes wearing a school uniform. Okay. Then wouldn't normal clothes be better? Well, whatever. What's done is done.
グラジオールがギガロマニアックスとどう関係してくるの？
ギガロ？何？
Ayase raised her eyebrows in confusion. Seemed like she didn't know. Maybe Gigalomaniac was just a term that Sena used for them.
ギガロマニアックスだよ。セナはディソードを持つ力の持ち主のことをそう呼んでた。ディソードはディラックの海につながったパイプだとかなんとか。
呼び方は人それぞれかもしれないわ。ディソードは人の邪心を具現化したものよ。グラジオール記目視録詩編にそう書いてある。第3巻11章23節。予言書なのよ、それは。
As she said that, her gaze was fixated on the book in my hands.
みんなはこう言うわ。私が歌詞によって予知を行っていると。だけど私はグラジオール記目視録詩編からインスピレーションを受けているだけ。その詩編こそ予言の書なのよ。なぜ気づかないの？誰も。
Good question.
予言の書って冗談でしょ？
事実よ。この渋谷で今まさに起きていることを、そしてこれから起きようとしていることをスイグラーは予言し物語にしている。
スイグラー？
グラジオール記目視録詩編の作者。個人だけれどスイグラーは強大な黒騎士だったと思うわ、私は。
I was really starting to think that Black Knights was just her term for gigalomaniacs. And if the author of this book was a gigalomaniac, then no wonder he could predict the future. I skimmed through the book I was holding. The Gladio Saga, Volume 17, the Book of Psalms and Revelation. And what I saw shocked me. It was blank. No matter how many pages I turned, no matter where I looked inside the book, there wasn't a single word. Delusion? What the hell? I turned back to check the front cover. It wasn't a normal book cover. It was almost entirely blank. All that was written was the title and the author, not even the name of the publisher. Once again, I tried flipping through the book from the beginning. But even the first page was blank. And no matter how many pages I went through, I couldn't find a single one of any writing.
これ不良品？
どういうこと？
だってこれ全部白紙じゃないか。
何を言っているの？ちゃんと書かれているわ。何度も読んでいるのよ、私は。
そんなこと言ったって。ほら。
I shoved the open book right in Ayase's face.
どこからどう見ても真っ白だよ。
ちっとも白紙なんかじゃないわ。
いや、白紙だって。
ここに字が書いてある。見えないの？ 匠。
Was she screwing with me? Or was she actually being serious? Maybe Ayase had been a complete mental case all along, and I only realized it just now?
君には見えないのね。侵食されているからだわ。邪神王に。
Ayase was dead serious. She really didn't seem to be joking. In fact, I was pretty sure I'd never seen her crack a joke even once before. I took another look at the book, but I really didn't see a thing.
僕には白紙にしか見えないよ。
そう。
Ayase's shoulders drooped in disappointment, and she then took the book from my hands. Her hands were cold to the touch.
考えたことがある？
何が？
世界は人によって見える形が違うということ。その差異を確かめることはできないわ。概念や認識を他人と完璧に一致させることは不可能だから。でもこれだけははっきりしている。君が見ているものと私が見ているもの、その違いは邪神による影響よ。邪神の集合体が邪神をグラジオール。目覚めようとしている。もうすぐ。もしも目覚めたら、きっとこの世に67億ある世界は邪神王が生む混沌によって混じり溶け合うことになるわ。境界が消え、邪神により連結された世界になるのよ。あらゆるものが規則性もなく生まれ、あらゆるものが一瞬で死ぬ。概念も認識も因果律もすべて破壊される。すべてあるがゆえに何もない世界。あらゆる神話と同じように予言されているわ。終末予言、滅びの歌。
Was that really true? Was that what was written in the blank book? In the Gladial book of Psalms and Revelation?
このままでは滅びの結末に至るだけ。今止められるのは私と君二人しかいないの。
どうして僕ら二人なの？
導きよ。他の黒騎士はすでに邪神王に侵食されてしまった。
Didn't you already just kill two of them? Wait. Ayase had said earlier that the blood on her was from the other Black Knights. Has she killed them somewhere here in the hospital? If she had, then where were all the bodies? Good question. What'd you do with the bodies, Ayase? Then, right as I thought that, Ayase walked past me and placed her hand on the door.
どこ行くの？
おしっこよ。
Well, okay. I guess even ladies with questionable holds on sanity need to take a tinkle break every once in a while. With a deadpan expression, she answered me, then headed off without waiting for my reply.
Huh?
I looked around the room, trying to find more volumes of the Gladial saga, but no dice. I didn't know how many volumes there were in total, but the one I picked up before was the 17th. Volumes 1 through 16 were nowhere to be found. Of course, it was possible that she just hadn't brought them to the hospital. I still couldn't believe that the book was totally blank, despite seeing it with my own two eyes. And so, I left the room before Ayase came back. So, the hospital had this corner set up on the far end of the lobby. Countless PCs were lined up there, and they all had internet access. Something I learned from the countless times I'd been here. Now that visiting hours had ended, all signs of life in the lobby had vanished. Even though it was so busy during the day, the lobby was now covered by an eerie silence, making it impossible for me to calm down. I'd definitely get kicked out if a nurse saw me, so I made a dash for the PCs. I wasn't an idiot. I knew a thing or two about Western mythos and stuff, and I learned it from all the anime, manga, and games I'd gone through. But even with all that, I never ever heard of the Gladios saga before. First time I ever seen the name was when I looked into Ayase online. So without further ado, time to look it up. I got quite a few results. Way more than I expected, actually, which worried me. Maybe I really was the only one who didn't know about it. But as I looked closely at the results, I noticed one common denominator. All of them had something to do with Phantasm or Fess. Whenever the Gladios saga was mentioned, it had to do with something Fess mentioned or Phantasm's world building, and other stuff like that. It was all a bunch of hearsay. Well, that's interesting. I could have sworn we found a little Wikipedia-like page on the Gladios saga and the main story route and pretty much all the other ones. But no matter how much I searched, I couldn't find any discussion on the actual contents of the book. Oh, there it is. Wikipediophilia. No comment. There was a wiki entry for it, but it barely even touched the premise. Fictional, a series of high fantasy novels based on the Eastern European myth of Gladio, the wicked-hearted king. Told over the course of 23 volumes, it depicts the battle between the 7 Black Knights and Gladio. It was written by R.C.O. Ziegler from 1929 to 1951. The series had been translated into several languages, but it never gained widespread appeal due to its rather esoteric writing style. That was all that was written there. Compared to the pages on other legends, each of which were filled to the brim with information, this one felt a little lacking. Even the wiki pages on D-Swords went into more detail than this. And since this was Wikipedophilia, the free encyclopedia that anyone could edit, there really was no way to verify its accuracy. Guess they were right about the tagline about this being an encyclopedia of useless knowledge. The picture on the D-Sword page had been entirely off the mark, for example. In the end, there was one thought that kept coming to the forefront of my mind. What if the Gladios saga was simply a product of Ayase's delusions? You know, now that I think about it, since a Gigalomaniac's delusions has the power to affect the world around them, and be completely perceptible to normies as though they were always there, except to other Gigalomaniacs, wouldn't that also potentially apply to any web pages, like what we're looking at here? Could this web page be a delusion that Ayase concocted up? Or something? Maybe Ayase was trying to create some sort of Lovecraftian mythos or something. Hell, Lovecraft himself, if I remember correctly, had used his books to share his crazed delusions with others. He called them personal nightmares, but yeah, pretty much. If that was what Ayase was doing for songs, then all this, even though it might have sounded kind of cool, was just a whole load of crazy schizo bullshit. And to make things worse, Ayase didn't seem to realize that. She was confusing it with reality. Was everything Ayase told me nothing but her insane delusions? Maybe the whole apocalypse thing was simply some delusion she wanted to see. Typical Chunibu stuff. Tortured kids who just wanted to see the world burn.
ああ、それは僕もだった。
Well, at least you have a little bit of self-awareness. So, if that was true, what exactly did Ayase actually want to happen? What kind of ending did she wish to reach? How did she want this legend to end? And was she someone I could trust?
信じるも何も綾瀬しかいないじゃないか。
Rimi was gone. Seina was kind of scary, and Kozupi was unreliable. I think you got Seina and Kozupi's descriptions backwards, Takumi. Kind of. So it didn't matter how crazy she was. She could spout delusions all day for all I cared. Ayase was the only one I could rely on. Plus, she had a D-sword. There was no denying that. And her songs really had prophesied the New Gen cases, whether they were based on delusions or not. Or, New Gen had been happening because her delusions were becoming reality. If anything, though, that just meant she was even more powerful than I thought. No harm in using that power to my advantage. I needed her. And luckily, for God knows what reason, she seemed to be interested in me. So, as long as I took her words with a grain of salt, I'd probably be fine. Probably not. Yep, it was all going to be just fine. Now I know for sure it's not going to be just fine. You jinxed it, man. You jinxed it. We're fucked. Actually, wait. I just remembered something. When a Gigalomaniac dies, their D-sword vanishes along with them. I mean, we saw that happen in Kozupi's route when Kozupi killed Rimi. So if they're actually dead, then how are their D-swords still here? Something's not adding up here.
杭を打って杭を打って闇夜を切り裂き月光を浴びて幾千もの鉄鎚は汝の痛みとなりて今解き放たれるやがて叫びは宙に舞い夜空は赤く染まるだろう
Ayase was sitting on her bed, eating some hospital food. Wait. She wasn't actually eating it. She was just listlessly poking her frozen tofu with her chopsticks, all the while quietly singing a song. It was one of the prophetic phantasm songs, the one that foretold the third New Gen case, the crucifixion. It was called A Contract of Blood to Seal Our Sin. I was familiar with it myself, as I had bought the album. But in this case, Ayase wasn't striking a steak. Rather, she was striking her chopsticks into her tofu. Or, I suppose it was closer to stabbing. As soon as she saw me, she gave a faint smile, as if relieved about something.
戻ってこないかと思ったわ。
Thanks for the vote of confidence, I guess.
どこへ行っていたの？
I went to the web. Not the spider web, but the web.
ちょっと調べ物をロビーの PC で。
今日はここに泊まって。
Just as long as you promise not to slit my throat while I sleep.
一緒にいて。
Again, just promise not to slit my throat while I sleep. What? Really? I flinched instinctively at Ayase's bold request. Had I tripped a flag without noticing? Yes.
お腹空いている。
And the flag is red, just in case you're wondering.
食べてもいいわよ。
Have some what? Oh, tofu. She picked up some frozen tofu for chopsticks and offered it to me.
それって綾瀬が食べたくないだけじゃ。
そうよ。
Well, at least she's being honest. She pursed her lips into a smile.
まずいの、病院食は。不浄な邪心に染まっているのね。きっと。
Well, okay. God damn it. Wicked Heart's this, Wicked Heart's that. Was that all she knew how to say? The two of us were talking online. She'd have been banned for spamming by now.
邪心に染まってるのに僕は食べてもいいの？
Good question. Well, Ayase, is this halal for me to eat? I wonder how many of you people watching would get the reference to what I just said.
普段から邪心まみれでしょ、匠は。
Well, you know what they say. You are what you eat.
コンビニのお弁当やカップ麺は不浄なる食べ物の最たる例よ。
She's not wrong, actually. You want to know something fun, dear viewer? Look up microscopic organisms / insects in instant noodles. Have fun.
黒騎士として覚醒するためには摂取をやめるべきだわ。
綾瀬は普段は何を食べてるの？
チョコレート。
That's surprisingly, what's the word I want to use? Typical?
チョコレートって十分邪心に染まってそうな気がするけど。
Yeah, well, it's a good kind of taint, Takumi. Was that actually all she ate? Chocolate? Talk about an unbalanced diet. Hers was worse than mine, WTF. Yeah, because, I mean, if that's all she eats, where does all the fat go?
チョコレートはいいわ。邪心を打ち払う力を持つのよ。あの甘さは。
Sweetness? Must be a milk chocolate eater then, because the more pure the chocolate, the more bitter the taste. Bullshit. You may talk fancy, but really, you just have a sweet tooth.
というわけで、匠。さあ。
Ayase brought the frozen tofu closer to my face. Yeah, I'll pass. I'm not really a fan of frozen tofu either, unless you have reason to suspect that the tofu or any food that a woman gives you might be laced with something you don't want to eat. You eat the food, Takumi. You be a good boy and eat a lady's food for her if she gives it to you.
いらない。
There are some people who will say that one of the ways you can get to a woman's heart is through her stomach. But when that woman's trying to get through to you through your stomach, you shut up and say ah.
それは許されないわ。
What the fuck is going on? This wasn't fair. It was every man's dream to hear a girl say, okay, say ah. So why did it do nothing for me? Because you're doing it wrong. Maybe it was because the food was Ayase's unwanted leftovers. Or maybe it was because she was a 3D girl. Well, she definitely wasn't going to give up trying to feed me, so I reluctantly opened my mouth. As I chewed the tofu, the broth spread throughout my mouth.
よく頑張ったわ。これで一歩、黒騎士に近づいたわよ、匠。
Note to self: in order to become a gigolomaniac, eat tofu. I sure didn't feel any closer.
次はこのきんぴらごぼうを。
Ayase, please, Ayase. No more. You know what? I think I'm just gonna go ahead and end things here. Because if nothing else, when we come back, we're definitely going to be stuck in nothing but exclusive new story content from this point forward. I think that much is pretty much obvious at this point. But I gotta say, though, almost half of this whole freaking episode just felt like as though it was a huge waste of time. Primarily because it treated scenes that didn't really change much, if at all, as though they were completely new scenes, and then just had us not skip through them and read through all of them until we eventually got to the portions right around this part where things do truly change. It just kind of feels like filler content to me, you know? Like, seriously. I didn't need the extra setup here. I mean, I know where I am. I know why. Well, I mean, with Takumi Misumi first showing up at the hospitals, that makes sense to me because Rimi isn't here with us, which is one hell of a deviation from how the other routes tend to treat this. Like, I could understand that for sure, but everything else before, not relating to that though, right before then, Ayase's backstory, going through that again, Sua's visit, all that stuff, it was all for the most part just the same exact scenes again. Line by line for dialogue. And it just kept going and going and going. I will say, yeah, compared to all the other heroines' routes so far, the beginning of Ayase's route certainly feels like it's got the most abundance of filler content, shall we say. Definitely one mark I will levy against it, for sure. But, I mean, hey, we got the big mystery relating to how exactly she got all bloodied up and how she got Nanami and Rimi's D swords here with her. Maybe we'll find out in the next episode. So, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end things here, and, well, yeah, I hope those of you who tuned in have enjoyed this latest episode of Chaos Head Noah. If you did, and you want to see more content from me, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all next time. Take care.